According to debt.com, half of all Americans surveyed carry some form of medical debt. Well, now credit agencies are removing most of those records from your credit report this summer. For more on what you need to know about this move, I'm joined by Ted Rossman, Bankrate.com's senior industry analyst. Thank you for joining us. Now, this is huge. This affects about 70% of the medical debt listed on credit reports. What do people need to know about the type of medical debt this does and does not apply to?
Paid medical collections are going to come off of credit reports starting in July. So that's a really big improvement for a lot of people. Also, these medical collections need to be in collections for at least a year to show up on your credit report starting in July. That's up from 6 months now. And then the other change, which takes effect next year, has to do with the amount of the medical debt. If it's below $500, it'll be disregarded from the credit report. So these are all changes that I think will help a lot of people's credit scores.
And you said in your notes that this is a continuation in how some of these score algorithms give less weight or disregard certain types or amounts of medical debt over the last several years. How significant is this going to be for people's credit scores?
For some people, it could lift their credit score 100 points or more. Somebody who otherwise had really good credit and is dragged down by this one instance of medical debt. And that's really emblematic of what's happening here. There's a push from the CFPB and the lending industry to say, medical debt may be a little apples to oranges here. If it's a one-time, maybe literally life and death kind of situation, that's different than your month in, month out credit card bills, car loans. There's also a lot of confusion with respect to insurance, which is why they're going to have this 1 year waiting period after it goes into collections, giving people more time to sort it out. It reminds me of other shifts, like taking public records such as tax liens and library fines and traffic tickets off of credit reports. I think the industry is moving more towards credit-like obligations, things like buy now, pay later, streaming plans, cell phones. Those seem more reflective of credit risk than things like medical debt and traffic tickets.
Let's talk about medical debt, how it's going to be reported differently starting July 1st, 2022, which recently passed, and then also how things are going to be changed around the top of the year 2023. And this is going to be a good video for people that kind of want to understand why we have such a mess around reporting debt collections, while the credit reporting system really is a system based on identity theft and fraud, and why this situation has continued to allow to go on for so long. And what we're going to really talk about initially now is how, because I believe that the CFPB has put pressure on a lot of the data furnishers, right? So they call them credit reporting agencies. Really what they are is data furnishers. They put so much pressure on these data furnishers around their business practices. What they're going to try to now do is change the way in which they do something, which was this medical debt that so many people experience. And they're going to try to use that to get the CFPB off their back. And it may work, it may not work. And this is the result of the guy that heads that particular organization in the Biden administration. And I had put that on my community wall. And I want people to really understand is that they're not doing this because they think it's the right thing to do. They're doing this because they're worried about people attacking their business vertical and their business model, which is really based around identity theft. It's also based around fraudulent information and fraudulent reporting of information. And therefore, they want to continue to do that because they have multi-billion-dollar organizations. I think Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, I know the first two are publicly traded companies, and their market cap is in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. Right? So they want to keep things the way they are because they're making so much money. So they're going to make minor changes to get the government off their back. So this article from CNET talks about Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion plan to remove nearly 7% of medical collection debt from consumer credit reports starting July 1st. Those paid medical collections will be removed from credit reports. We had a scenario where even if you paid the collection, it would show on your credit. And it can be detrimental to your credit score. And then, in addition, any credit agencies are going to give you now a year to address any outstanding balances before it becomes part of their credit file. And then at the top of the year, which is going to be 2023, they're going to remove any medical collections under $500. Therefore, if you have medical collections on your particular account now and it's under $500, even if it's multiple collections, they're going to remove those. The reason why this is important is because people will go to the doctor And many people don't understand this because they don't understand how the medical system works. You can go to the doctor, right? Let's say you go to the ER and you're being treated by multiple people. You may think all those people work for the hospital. They don't really work for the hospital. They're contracted to work there. Therefore, they could be working for another agency that has a contract to deliver services to that particular hospital. And then what happens is your insurance company gets billed literally by 20 or 30 different groups. And then all those groups file the insurance to your insurance provider. Then the insurance provider pays what they think they're going to pay, and then those bills bounce back to you. The challenge is you may not even be aware that you owe the bill. Then what happens is next thing you know, after a certain amount of time, it gets sent to collections, and then now debt collectors come after you because they buy those essentially they buy the debt collection data rolls. Now this stuff is on your credit report. You were not even aware that you owed the debt, because many people think if I just reach out to the hospital and I have to find out whether or not I still owe the hospital money, it doesn't mean that you don't owe these other agencies that have been contracted to work at that hospital, and they can say that you have a bill. And therefore, in your mind, you paid your bill, and then you don't realize something is going on until debt collectors start reaching out to you. Then there's also a lot of inaccuracies in that particular setup, but we'll go into that later. So this is how it works with a lot of people when they have debt through the medical system. It's not because they just refuse to pay. Many times they're not even aware that they actually owe this debt. And if they were made aware of it, they could have went on, create a payment plan or something of that nature, but they weren't even aware that they owed it. You would be surprised how you can go to the hospital for something and something really random will show up a year later as medical debt, and you weren't even aware that you owed it. I'm talking about like $70, $80, $100. You could just pay that right out of pocket, but you weren't aware that you owed it. So how does medical collection debt currently impact credit reports? It's normally sent to a collection agency after 60 to 100 days of delinquency. From then, the bureaus extend a 180-day grace period to consumers to address this debt. That's incorrect. They don't do that. And then what they say is they want you to negotiate with the collections agencies, right? Before adding the credit report, before it negatively impacts your score. So they normally don't wait the 180-day grace period. Normally, after the 120 days of delinquency, once it gets to 180, it gets sent to debt collections, right? And then from there, they start collecting your debt. So they make it seem as if you get past the 120, you get another 180. No, once it's 180, it gets sent to collections. So when they state that you owe the money, you got, 6 months to make it whole, or to make sure that you pay it off, or it gets sent to collections. So the way this article reads it, it makes it seem like you get 120 plus a 180. That doesn't work that way. They say that unpaid and paid medical debt generally stays on your credit report for 7 years after being reported. So even if you pay it, it still stays on there for 7 years. Then we talk about this other change is going to go in the first half of 2023. Any debt under $500 is going to be taken off your credit report. Okay, so this is a particular article from the CFPB, not an article. This is a study on consumer financial protection about debt. And this is one of the reasons why we think they made this change. Let me zoom this in. CFPB research shows that $88 billion in medical debt and consumer reports as of June 2021. The total amount of medical debt and collections in the U.S. is likely higher, since not all medical debts are furnished to consumer reporting companies. Most medical debt collection trade lines on consumer reports is under $500, right? As of 2021, 58% of third-party debt collection trade lines were for medical debt, making medical debt the most common debt collection trade line on credit reports. The next most common was telecommunication debts at only 15%. So look at the disparity. The most common is at 58% is medical debt. The next most common is telecommunications debt at 15%. Past due medical debt collections reported to consumer reporting companies. It appears on your credit, lowers your credit score. This may reduce your access to credit and make it harder to find a job. Medical debt collections are less predictive of future payment problems than other debt collections are. Certain newer credit models take this into account, but widely used models still weight medical and non-medical collections equally. So what we mean is that the fact that you may have medical collections is not really predictive that you're not going to pay your other bills. And some of the newer algorithms or some of the newer models, right, may take this into account, but still pretty much across the board, they still take medical debt and non-medical collections equally. So anything seen as unpaid debt, regardless of the specific type of debt, right, is taken and probably you seen as derogatory on your account. Now, the issue I have with this whole system is that there's a lot of what I would call inaccuracies in the system. And therefore, you can pay something and it still show up on your report. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And this is why I try to tell people is that the way in which we look at credit repair is incorrect, because we assume we're operating in something that is actually designed to be accurate. And then we assume that, well, it's designed to be accurate. So then what my job is to do is help make it accurate. I'm here to tell you the system is designed to be inaccurate. So therefore, it was designed to operate as an inaccurate system. It was never designed to report accurately. And you would think in 2023, with the amount of fintech we have going on, the amount of data compiling we have going on, we would be able to get some accuracy in reporting. But in reality, the system is designed to report inaccurate information. And when you understand how the financial system actually works, when you understand that different categories of people are worth more to the financial system than other categories of people, you understand the incentive to build a system that reports inaccurate information. Why? Because it makes everybody money. The only person that gets the short end of the stick is the consumer. So this is why I tell people when they talk about credit repair, we're made to believe that the system is designed to report accurate information, and then our job is to help the system report accurate information. That's incorrect. The system is designed to report inaccurate information. So this is why I said if I teach people how to actually fix credit, I'll go to prison, because you're supposed to operate under the impression that the system is designed to report accurate information. No, it's not. It's designed to report inaccurate information, and it does that very, very well, right? So you have a system that works to do exactly what it's designed to do, report inaccurate information to people. And then they take that inaccurate information and they're able to build verticals and models off this inaccurate information. And then the consumer has to figure out how to manage this scenario. So you as a consumer, you're supposed to stress out on whether or not the information is accurate. Well, why would you if the system was designed to present inaccurate information? I'm sorry, let me repeat myself. Why would you if the system was designed to report accurate information? Why would you be stressed out about the information being inaccurate, right? So this is how they get you. And that's why you can, put stuff on your phone and, you could constantly be monitoring your credit score and constantly be monitoring your credit, because they're getting you to participate in this contract around inaccurate information. And a lot of people don't understand that. If you go to these agencies and you allow them, you agree to their app, to put their app on their phone, in that terms of service, you're agreeing that they can furnish your information. So then you're enabling them to present more inaccurate information on you. I'm not saying that's not the same thing as you asking to get your credit reports. When you sign up to these particular apps, you're agreeing that they can furnish your information. So that's another scenario. Who told these people that they can furnish your information to anybody? Like, how do you build a business where I can take person XYZ in our society and I can collect information on that person that they never agreed to, and then I can sell that information to somebody else and they didn't agree to anything? And that information can be used against this person in lending. It can be used against this person in trying to get housing. It also can be used against that person trying to get a job, but they never agreed to it. So you see why they want you to sign up for their applications and sign up for their services. Why? Because in that terms of service, you're agreeing to that contract. But if you never agreed to it from the gate, so how do they get the ability to do that? But they do. So this is the system. So that's why I said you got to be really careful. Most credit repair is about paperwork games and stuff like that. That's not what this is, right? And so that's why you got to be careful about this stuff, because if you really show people what this thing is really based on, it can cause a lot of problems, because you're not supposed to know. You're supposed to be operating under a falsehood that they're really trying to get this right, and you just need to help them get it right. That's not what this is. It's not anything about that. And now you're starting to see that the CFPB is finally starting to deal with maybe 10% of the problem, but they're not going to ever deal with 100% because it would destroy this vertical. Let's keep going. So here's an article from Brookings. So the real problem with credit reports is the outstanding number of errors, right? More than 1 in 5 consumers have a potentially material error in their credit file that makes them look riskier than what they are. Lenders respond to this incorrect data by offering you higher interest rates, less favorable terms, or denying credit if the error makes you look too risky, right? So Equifax collects information from banks, mortgage services, debt collectors, other credit providers, sells the raw data back to potential lenders. That data is aggregated into a single credit score, which is used to determine if you qualify for a loan and so at what interest rate. That paragraph right there tells you everything you need to know about the system. When you start to actually understand how the financial system actually works, right? That paragraph tells you everything you know. When you don't understand how the financial system actually functions in this society, that paragraph won't make sense to you. But this guy who's an economist for Brookings just gave you the whole system. He gave it to you, but you got to understand how the system actually operates to understand what's going on. So given the importance of credit scores, why are they so inaccurate? 3 reasons: size, speed, economic incentives of the system. Each of the major bureaus has over 200 million credit files that on average contain 13 past and current obligations, resulting in 2.6 billion pieces of data. So each month, more than 1 billion pieces of data are updated, requiring a lot of speed. So with so much data coming from so many sources so quickly, errors are inevitable, especially if you have a common name. I have an extremely common name, right? I got one of the most common names inside the United States, right? There's a lot of John Smiths inside the United States. There's a lot of John Browns inside the United States. There's a lot of, Lucy Smiths inside the United States, right? 8 million times a year, consumers contacted one of the big 3 credit reporting agencies to dispute information. Yet the dispute system is not designed to fix the problem. Exactly. The credit bureau is only legally required to check with the creditor or the debt collector and ask them whether they stand by their claim. As long as the creditor says you owe money, the dispute is resolved in their favor. As the National Consumer Law Center concludes, credit bureaus have little economic incentive to conduct proper disputes or improve their investigations. Why do they have little economic incentive to conduct proper disputes or improve their investigations? In my opinion, don't got to be your opinion. In my opinion, based on my research, based on my understanding of the financial system, the reason why they have little is really economic incentive. And I want you to really understand the term economic incentive to conduct proper disputes or improve their investigations is because of what? Lenders respond to this incorrect data by offering you higher interest rates, less favorable terms, and denying credit, and the error makes you look risky. But what's the most important thing? Lenders respond to this incorrect data by offering you higher interest rates. And so once you understand how the system actually functions, you understand the game that they're actually playing. And they get you to participate in it thinking, well, I just got to make sure they got the right information there, right? Credit reporting is the second most frequent source of consumer complaints handled by the CFPB, trailing only debt collection. So the top 2 complaints is reporting and debt collection. The debt collection is based off the reporting. They feed into each other. It's a feedback mechanism. The 2 top sources of these complaints were incorrect information, 74%, and investigation, 11%. And one of the biggest challenges people have is that you don't really have a process to get these data furnishers to correct your information. It's a P.O. box, right? So there's a P.O. box. You can't go to their offices. If you call the number, it's very hard to get a live person. When you get a live person, it's somebody in another part of the country. So they've insulated themselves from any real process to be able to actually get a response from them, but then also be able to do some type of process. So they don't have on their website, if you feel that information is inaccurate or about you, here's the steps that you need to take. That's no on their website. And if it is, I've never seen it. Right? And it's very laborious. So all of this, get a letter, get it certified mail, put the letter a certain way so they got to open it. Because in reality, what they do is they take a lot of the direct mail that they get and they throw it in the trash can. They're not interested in reading it. Why? Because they're not going to stop running their business because of inaccurate information, because their system is based on inaccurate information, right? So they don't have an economic incentive to report things correctly, because nobody has come in and told them from the government that you can't do what you do. They're allowed to continue to do it. So why would they stop? Right? They don't care about it being wrong. They make money with bad information. Change the liability structure for inaccurate data. Right now, no one's on the hook if there's incorrect information. Exactly. Nobody's responsible for the information being accurate. So when I was to work in medical in the healthcare system, we would get a specimen from the hospital. We worked in a laboratory. We had an SOP, a process in which we had to verify that that specimen matched the person that was actually in the computer. Because what you didn't want is to make sure that you accepted the wrong specimen on the wrong person and they get treatment on blood work or lab specimens that didn't belong to them. That could kill them. Therefore, we had a really strict SOP on how we had to verify that this particular specimen belongs to this person in the computer. And then we were responsible for that, right? We were responsible for it, but the hospital's also responsible for it. Okay? Nobody's on the hook if the information is incorrect. If you find that there's incorrect information on your credit report, who's responsible for it? You're responsible as a consumer to correct it. Why would they not be responsible for furnishing it? That's identity theft. And it's also fraud. But they're allowed to get away with that. Now, if I go and I get some data and I start doing credit cards and I start, opening up accounts with other people's information, I can go to federal prison for that. That's wire fraud, all these other things. So I'm responsible for that, right? I'm on the hook because I'm engaged in identity theft. I'm engaged in identity fraud. If you find out that there's incorrect information on your credit report, but yet businesses have used that information to determine whether or not you're worthy of credit, whether or not you can stay at a particular place, whether or not you can get a job, who's responsible for that? No one. It's just, this is what it is. And then they have people in this mentality that, well, all I got to do is get, you're supposed to look at your credit and make sure that the information is correct. How come they don't need to make sure that the information is correct? They're the one presenting the information. I'm not submitting that information to them. They are. They're accepting information from other parties, right? And then they're selling that information to other people around my identity. Why aren't they responsible for making sure the information is correct? So when you understand that this system is based on presenting inaccurate information, that is the actual business model, then you understand how the system works. Never about the information being correct. So the law only requires that the credit bureau check with the provider of the information that there is a claim, right? Penalize those who repeatedly provide inaccurate information. Well, that would be all the agencies because they all provide repeatedly inaccurate information across the board, right? So this will require accurate, actual investigations and would be expensive to conduct on all 8 million complaints. So we got 8 million complaints. So what they're saying is that you should just do random sampling. So if only 5 to 10% of complaints were investigated, the threat of an investigation and the penalties from providing inaccurate information would incentivize data providers to clean up their act. But this is the question. If I go take a bunch of data from a bunch of people, I go on the dark web and I buy a bunch of accounts, right? And then I go create other accounts with that information. I go get credit cards with that information. I do these things with information for my financial gain. I can go to federal prison for that. Data furnishers, without a person's consent, they aggregate data on individual citizens, right? They don't care if the data that they're aggregating is accurate. Then they sell access to that data to other businesses. That's their business model, and it's legal. You see how this works? And then you as a consumer, what you're supposed to do is stress out on whether or not the data is accurate. My question is, when did I agree for you to aggregate and sell my data? When did that happen? Because if that's the case, how come I can't do it? Right? How come I can't take other people's data and sell it to other people? So what business structure do I need to create to where it's legal so I don't go to federal prison for it? So these are the issues with this particular scenario, right? So that's that article. So now we have another study done by Federal Trade Commission, December 12th, right? December 2012, I apologize. And I want to read with you right here, right? So we have the executive summary. Pretty much we wrapped the whole study up in like a few paragraphs. Overall, we found that 26%, they did 1,000-person study, 1,001 study, identified at least one potentially material error on at least one of their 3 credit reports. Although 206 consumers, 21% of the participants had a modification to at least one of their credit reports after the dispute process, only 129 consumers, which is 13%, experienced a change in their credit score as a result of these modifications, right? What I want to ask you is that why would you need to dispute information about yourself? Why shouldn't the information be correct? So you're on the hook as a consumer to make sure the information is correct. They're not on the hook to make sure that it's correct information. Because we have a scenario where a debt collector can present information to these data furnishers and they believe it's true, right, on face value. Now, there's supposedly a process that this debt collector is supposed to go through, but that can't be true if we have this many errors. So then the question is, what is the process? If I'm a debt collector, right, or I'm an institution, I'm a creditor, and I'm saying that, okay, you're defaulted on this debt, what is the process that I have to go through to make sure, one, you're the correct person, right, to make sure that you're actually who I say you are, and to make sure that that particular account belongs to you? What's the process? Then you can challenge it. Then all they do is they go back to that particular creditor or debt collector and they say, well, is this correct? And if they say yes, it stays on your report. But the question is, how do they determine that you are who you say they are? Right? How do they determine that you actually are who they say you are? What's their process? And then how do they determine that that actual debt that they say belongs to you actually belongs to you? What's the process? And if you ask those, you can never find that out. You can't find it out from the debt collector, and you can't find it out from these data furnishers. And this is just how they're allowed to operate, right? And then all these major lenders, apartment complexes, sometimes even your jobs, they use this information as part of their decision-making process. Okay, so now we go into the debt collectors. They're engaged in identity theft and fraud all the time. Their whole business is based on this. Why? How do they determine if they say that you're XYZ, right? Well, how do they know I'm XYZ? So if they say you're David Williams, how do you know I'm David Williams? What's your process to determine that? Because David Williams is a very common name. So how do you know I'm me? What's your process? Didn't they say you owe the debt? How do you know I owe the debt? What's your process? Right? Because what they do is they buy mounds of debt from creditors. So you got the original creditor, and I'm not going to go into how that actually works because people are not supposed to know how this system actually works. But we'll talk about what's commonly known, right? So they buy debt from the creditor, which they shouldn't be allowed to do. They buy debt from the creditor, right? And they have these big mounds of debt. So this now, because of electronics, used to be on paper. Now it's all electronic, right? And then they download that into their system and they try to collect on it. And they're able to buy it at such a low rate. So let's say I can get 10,000 names ranging from owing this amount to this amount, right? And I buy that for pennies on the dollar, right? I buy it for pennies on the dollar. So even if I only collect on 30% of it, I'm still up on the whole overall account. And then that debt that doesn't get collected on, that gets sold to somebody else. And it keeps working its way through the system because everybody's going to try to collect on it. But a lot of times what you'll have is that a person will pay on it, but it still gets sold to somebody else. So then what happens? They get reached out again and say you owe on the debt. But I just paid the debt, but you owe on the debt. Now they're reporting this to the data furnisher that you still owe on the debt, but you paid it. You got documentation to show that you paid it. Now you got to go through the process of proving to the data furnisher that you actually paid the debt. Why don't they have to go through the process of proving that you actually owe the debt? They don't have to do that. Right? Second thing. Most debt collectors, not all, but many, have to be licensed in the state. They also got to have a surety bond. But the first question we want to ask ourselves is that from a contract standpoint, I'm not an attorney and I don't present myself as one. I definitely don't have an expertise in law, right? Took contract law in college and realized ain't no in the world I could be an attorney. Too much memorization. However, one thing I understood when I took contract law in college is how to affirm a contract. So a contract got to be affirmed, right? You also can't affirm a contract with a minor under any circumstances. But there's certain scenarios in which a contract cannot be affirmed. So if I reach out to somebody and I say, if you don't do this, right? If you don't do this, I'm going to do this to you, right? So if you don't do this, I'm going to do this to you. The question I want to ask is, how can the person affirm that contract if I just threatened them? So I'm not an attorney. It wouldn't present myself as one. Don't know law like that. I studied the markets. I don't study the legal system. But my question is understanding, right? What makes a contract voidable, right? And it says that if the parties under duress, undue influence, was being intimidated, coerced, or threatened when enter into an agreement. Well, debt collectors call you up all the time and tell you if you don't pay this money, it's going to go to collections, right? or if you don't pay this money, yada, yada, yada. But they're not supposed to be allowed to do that. And I shouldn't believe if I don't pay the money, it's going to go to collections. Right? So that shouldn't be inside my head the way if I don't do what this person tells me to do, it's going to impair my ability to engage in commerce because it's going to go on my credit report. But this is what happens all the time. So that's why people will pay a bill through a debt collector and then get contacted 6 months later with that same bill from another person. They'll pay it again. Why? Because they worried about it going to their credit. But they're being intimidated, coerced, or threatened when they enter into that agreement. So that contract should be null and void, but they're allowed to do this. They're allowed to do this. They do this every day. See? So this whole system is based on fraud. It's based on identity theft. It's based on threatening, intimidating, coercing people, which means the contract is null and void. The contract can't be affirmed. This whole system is based on that. And what you're told as a consumer, well, if you just do it this way, this will work out. It's not built to work out that way. It's built for them to continue to engage in activities that they're engaging in. Right? That's like saying that you a slave on the plantation. Well, if you just do this, they won't beat you up. Well, you got to realize the whole system is designed to using threat, intimidation, and coercion to steal your labor. That's the whole system. You are so deep into the system, you think, well, how do I engage this system without getting the worst part of it? Right? And that's how they manipulate you psychologically. You don't ever say, well, you know what? This whole setup is bullshit. It's how do I get through it? So that's the problem. Second issue with debt collectors. Many of them got to be licensed and have a bond in the state. My biggest problem with debt collectors is that when they reach out to you, they don't give you their license number and they don't give you their surety bond number. Therefore, I don't even know if you're actually a legitimate debt collector. Anybody, we live in an era of massive identity theft. Anybody can go buy a bunch of addresses, go print up some documents and send it out to people's house and say, you owe us money. Here go the phone number, call us back. This is an effort to collect the debt. Anybody can do that. That is not difficult to do. That's not difficult to do. Anybody can do that. Right? Equifax a few years ago had a data breach where literally millions of accounts got breached and sent to somebody. Somebody got those accounts. Right? Therefore, when a debt collector reaches out to you, how come they don't have to give you their license number? How come they don't have to give you their surety bond number? So I can know that you actually are legitimate and authorized to collect debt in this state. So here's a company that licensed debt collectors. They tell you these are the states in which you need to be licensed. They also give you your bond amount. Right? These are the states in which you need to be licensed. Right? So my question is, when a debt collector reaches out to you, how come they don't give you their license and give you their bond number? How come when you request it, they don't give it to you? But I'm supposed to believe you're a real debt collector. I don't know when a debt collector sends you mail, says you owe it, how come they license and they bond number not on that mail? Because how do I know who you are? You could be anybody. I'm just supposed to send you a check because you say so? But it goes back to this, right? What does it go back to? You're under undue influence. You're being intimidated. You're being coerced. You're being threatened to enter into that agreement. Right? That's what they're doing. But really, based on contract law, the contract should be voidable. It's null and void. But see, nobody looks at it from that standpoint. So this legal argument may be incorrect, but that's how I see it. I didn't think you could force somebody into a contract. I didn't think you could do that, but it looks like you can. And so that's what I'm saying. This whole system it's a bunch of BS, and it's designed to get people trapped into it and make you try to figure out, well, how can I navigate the system without getting caught up in it? Even though you're not the person that's in the wrong, they're the people that are doing things wrong, but they have so much of a lack of accountability on their side that nothing happens to them. Next thing, we talk about the surety bond. They need to have a surety bond. As a consumer, if the collection agency does something wrong or the debt collector does something wrong against me, I cannot put a lien on their surety bond because I'm not the obligee in this scenario. It's the data furnisher, but I should be able to. So you can sue the debt collector. I shouldn't just be able to sue them. I should be able to put a lien against their surety bond if they do something incorrect against me, because you can do that in other environments, but you can't do it with debt collectors, right? Because the way I'm positioned in this particular structure, I'm really not in the party of three. That's the problem. So the way this particular agreement is composed, the consumer should be part of this agreement. And I should have access to that surety bond if they do something wrong, like lie or misrepresent themselves or, violate, I think, the fair trade scenario, whatever that is. So this is the issue. We're starting to see now that the CFPB is starting to go against these data furnishers and go against the way in which they handle collections. But they should do way more. And if I was, like I told before, if I had $30-40 million, I was wealthy, independently wealthy, I didn't have to worry about my relationships with other people to make my money, man, I would go after this industry so hard they wouldn't know what hit them. There's a guy that came out of Houston, Texas. He was an energy trader. He's still relatively young. I think he's in his early 40s. But he's independently wealthy. He made so much money energy trading, he don't have to ever work again for anybody. He just get kicked back. And him and his wife started an organization, and they're about transparency in medical billing, something that Trump was trying to do, which caused a lot of issues for him, but we ain't gonna go into that. It's not a political argument. And they're about transparency in medical billing because most people show up at the hospital, they don't know what they're gonna pay for stuff. It's not listed anywhere. Then you owe the money, but you don't even realize what you was paying for from the gate. And he's pushing for that with agencies and foundations based around the fact that he's independently wealthy. He made a lot of money as an energy trader. So he not going to put money behind these particular initiatives and trying to lobby politicians, yada, yada, yada. I would love to do the same thing in this space because, like I said, this whole thing is based on furnishing inaccurate information because they have an economic incentive too. And because I understand the financial markets, I understand that different tranches of credit, right? Different credit tranches are more valuable than other credit tranches. And the goal of these data furnishers is to actually create different credit tranches. And that's what they go about doing. Their job is to create different credit tranches. And so they work with these debt collectors to help create different credit tranches that have different value to lenders. Right? And so once you start to understand how this system actually works, you understand what incentivizes their behavior and you start to understand what they ought to do. And until government, it's not that, private people can stop them. They got too much money. It's going to take somebody changing the rules in which they operate under that will not allow them to operate the same way. Right? But until there's an incentive or there's a punishment to either incentivize that they present correct information, or there's a punishment to where if they don't present correct information, they're going to continue to present incorrect information because the whole business model is based around them presenting incorrect information so they can create different credit tranches. And I think that's what most people don't understand. So this is why I said if I teach actually how to deal with these credit agencies and how to deal with credit, I will go to prison because they don't want anybody dealing with this type of stuff. I need to have so much money that if I need to leave the country at a moment's notice, I can. I don't have that kind of money right now. But if I get that kind of money, I'll do that. Because if I just need to go to Bali and live with Russell Simmons, I could go do that at a moment's notice. So that's pretty much going to be the video. David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. I'll talk to you later.